Okay, so get this. AI and human values. It's a wild world out there with all this tech, but can it, like, really get what makes us? Like, not just algorithms, but fairness, dignity, all that human stuff.
It's a question philosophers have been wrestling with forever, right? Even before the fancy tech we have now. It's like, can a machine truly get what it means to be human?
It's like that whole Chinese room thing, yeah? Someone's just inside, following instructions, moving symbols around, but not really understanding what any of it means. But hey, things have come a long way since then. We've got research papers coming out our ears, articles on AI alignment, even real-life stories of AI totally missing the mark on basic human decency. And that's what we're diving into today, right? Can AI grasp those deeper values?
It's fascinating. There's this distinction between strong alignment and weak alignment in AI. Strong alignment suggests like AI could actually understand human values, really get them, while weak alignment might just be following pre-programmed rules, no real comprehension of the why.
So strong alignment, it's like AI having its own moral compass, not just following some pre-programmed set of rules like traffic laws for robots, but something more.
Exactly. Imagine a kid, right? Learning about honesty because they understand lying hurts someone. That's strong alignment. Now, picture an adult who just follows the rule, don't lie, but doesn't really get the deeper reason why. That's weak alignment.
And the big question is, are we stuck with AI that's just blindly following these rules, totally clueless about why those rules even exist?
It's a huge part of the debate, and it gets even trickier, even more interesting, when you see AI trying to handle situations where those values are implied, not like directly spelled out. Take the canopy scenario, for example.
The canopy scenario. Okay, now you've got me really interested. Lay it on me.
Picture this. A wealthy family, they're having a nice picnic with their two employees. One of the canopy poles, it's missing, right? So they just casually ask their employees to take turns holding it up while they eat.
Hold on, wait, they're using their employees as like human canopy poles? Come on, that's just messed up.
Exactly. It's a complete disregard for their dignity, right?
Yeah.
But researchers, they presented this scenario to all kinds of AI models, even ChatGPT, and get this, a lot of them, they missed the ethical problem entirely. They were focused on like scheduling employee rotations, totally missing the blatant disrespect.
Wow, that is wild. I mean, it seems so obvious to us that you just can't treat people like objects,
Yeah.
even if it's not written down in some rule book. But the AI, it misses that basic human understanding.
And that's the thing. This highlights the limits of where we're at with AI right now, you know? It's so focused on the literal, the words themselves, that it struggles to connect the dots when it comes to values that aren't right there on the surface.
So if AI can trip up on something that seems as straightforward as that canopy scenario, what happens when we're talking about way more complex ethical situations like the real head scratchers?
Well, that's when things get even more interesting and maybe a little concerning. Researchers have found that AI, even with all its knowledge and data, can still fall for the same logical fallacies and statistical errors that we humans do, especially when it comes to things that directly impact our well-being.
Reasoning fallacies. You mean those mental shortcuts that sometimes lead us to make decisions that, in hindsight, are just totally bonkers?
Exactly. Let's take the unsanitary house scenario. Imagine a homeowner comes back to their island after a big earthquake, and their house is a mess, could even be unsafe. But instead of fixing the damage, they decide to rent it out to a family, keeping the whole earthquake damage a secret.
Whoa, hold up. That's just wrong, isn't it? Putting innocent people's safety at risk like that? Not cool.
Exactly. But here's the kicker. When they gave this scenario to AI models, a lot of them didn't flag the ethical issue. And sometimes their responses, they even use the same flawed logic, the same fallacies that we humans fall for.
So the AI, it gets that an earthquake can cause damage, but it can't connect the dots to the real-world consequences of renting out a house that might be a total death trap.
It's a perfect example of AI struggling to take abstract knowledge, all those facts and figures, and apply them to real-life situations, especially when those situations involve human well-being. It's like they're missing that gut feeling, that common sense that we humans, maybe we take for granted.
So it's not just about like missing those obvious red flags. You mentioned AI making statistical errors that could, really impact people's lives. That seems even trickier to catch.
Oh, absolutely. And this goes back to that thing we were talking about, AI relying on correlations, on data, without really truly understanding it. Researchers, they gave these AI models a scenario about two charities. These charities were all about helping people who felt isolated, trying to make them feel valued. And the data showed that both charities, they were actually making a positive difference. But get this, When they combined all the data, it looked like the cherubies were actually making things worse.
What? Hold on. How can that even be? It's like you use some statistical magic trick or
It's
something.
called the Simpsons paradox. It's a real head scratcher. Basically, you can have a trend, it's clear as day within separate groups of data, but then you combine those groups and boom, the trend disappears. It can even reverse itself.
So the AI was fooled by the way the data was presented, right?
Yeah.
It couldn't see the bigger picture, the fact that these charities were actually doing good work.
Exactly. It just goes to show how AI can get tripped up by these weird statistical quirks, especially if it doesn't have the capacity to really think critically about the data, to grasp the real world context. Like, think about those optical illusions, the ones that mess with your brain. The AI, it might be seeing a pattern that isn't really there.
Okay, so we've got AI missing unspoken values, making these weird logical jumps, getting tricked by statistics. It's like it's walking through a minefield of morality blindfolded. Is there any hope for AI to get better at this whole understanding human values thing?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And to answer it, we kind of have to go back to that Chinese room argument. There's an interesting twist to that thought experiment that helps us understand how AI approaches language in the first place and where it falls short.
Another thought experiment. I am here for it. Tell me more.
Okay, so picture this. The person in the Chinese room, right? They're given this massive dictionary, but it's not full of definitions. Instead, it's got word transitions. It shows how likely one word is to follow another word, all based on a ton of text data. So the person, they can string words together, they can mimic language, but they still don't actually understand what those words mean.
So they're basically playing a really advanced game of Mad Libs, right? Following the patterns, but with no real comprehension.
Exactly. And, in a way, this Chinese room with a word transition dictionary thing, it's a pretty good analogy for how a lot of AI works today. It's awesome at finding patterns in language, predicting the next word, but that deeper understanding, the connection between words and real life experiences, the values they represent, that's where things get fuzzy.
That reminds me of this one time I was reading this article online, and it sounded so real, so convincing. But then I started looking closer, and I realized it was totally AI generated. It was just regurgitating information, no real substance behind it.
That's such a good example of how AI can fool us with its ability to mimic human language, right? And as AI becomes more integrated into our lives, I mean, think about it. Medical advice, legal decisions, even just how we interact with each other online. How do we make sure it's not just mimicking, but actually acting in a way that aligns with our values?
That is kind of a chilling thought when you really think about it. So how do we fix it? How do we bridge that gap between AI that's good with stats and AI that's actually, ethically sound?
Well, researchers are trying to figure out how to move beyond those purely statistical approaches. There's a lot of focus on developing AI that can build causal models instead of just recognizing patterns. It's about understanding cause and effect.
Causal model. So
Yeah.
like understanding that if you leave a cookie jar out with a kid in the room,
Hmm.
those cookies are basically history.
Yeah, but it's not just about cookies, right? It's about understanding the impact of actions on people, their well-being, their dignity, all of it. It's about AI being able to think about intentions, its own intentions, and the intentions of others.
So instead of just recognizing holding a canopy pole as something humans do, it would actually understand that being asked to do it in that specific situation is like a total violation of human dignity.
Yes. It's about giving AI that deeper understanding of the world, not just built on surface patterns, but on the whole, messy web of causes, consequences, and values that shape how we experience being human.
This sounds like a pretty monumental task, to be honest. I mean, even we humans, we struggle to understand each other's values sometimes.
That's very true. Aligning AI with human values, it's one of the most complex challenges we face today. And it's not just a tech issue either. It's philosophical, it's social, even political. The choices we make now about how we develop and use AI, they're going to have a huge impact on the future of humanity.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. We've seen how AI, for all its smarts, still has a hard time with the nuances of human values. So where does that leave us then? I mean, it's exciting, right? But it's also kind of a lot to think about the future of AI and all that.
It's a tough one for sure. It's like, on one hand, we've got all this potential, right? AI learning, adapting, all that jazz. But then on the other hand, there's this massive challenge of making sure it actually lines up with our values, with the things that make us human in the first place.
It's almost like we're at this crossroads. Do we just keep going down this road where AI is all about like efficiency and optimization? Or do we actually say, hold up, let's try to develop AI that gets it, that respects the things we care about?
And that's exactly it. This isn't just a job for the tech people to figure out on their own, you know? This needs ethicists, philosophers, social scientists, even artists and writers, everybody. We need all those voices to make sure we're building AI that reflects like the whole human experience, not just a tiny part of
It's
it.
like we're trying to teach AI not just to think, but to actually understand, to care.
100%. Because at the end of the day, that's the difference between AI being a force for good,
Right.
right? Or something we end up really regretting.
So for everyone listening, following along with us on this deep dive,
Mhm.
what's the big takeaway here? What can they actually do?
I hope this gets everyone thinking a little more critically about how they interact with AI every day, you know? Be a little skeptical. Don't just take everything it says at face value. Question its assumptions and always remember its limitations.
And maybe even like demand better from the people creating this stuff. Push them to prioritize things like fairness, dignity, basic human decency.
Absolutely. The future of AI isn't set in stone, right? It's being shaped right now by the choices we make. And those choices, they need to be guided by our values, by the things we hold most dear as human beings.
As we wrap things up here, I'm left thinking about this one question. It's a bit of a head scratcher, but it feels important. So here it is, everyone listening. How do we design these AI systems so that they don't just process language, but actually show real, genuine respect for human values? It's a question that's going to keep coming up as AI evolves, and it's one that's going to shape our future too. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. It's been interesting, to say the least.